John Milton. John Milton, an eminent English poet, pamphleteer, and historian, is often regarded as the most significant English author after William Shakespeare. Born in London in 1608, Milton received his education at St. Paul's School and later attended the University of Cambridge. Proficient in at least 10 languages, he possessed extensive knowledge in literature, history, theology, philosophy, and natural sciences. His commonplace book, containing notes from his extensive reading, is currently housed in the British Library. During his lifetime, which spanned the tumultuous era before, during, and after the English Civil Wars between Royalists and Republicans, Milton was not only a celebrated poet but also a prominent figure in political and religious controversies. He authored numerous contentious works, many intended for an international audience. His writings advocated various causes, including combating corruption among the English clergy, championing freedom of the press, endorsing divorce on grounds of mutual incompatibility, and justifying the necessity of Charles I's execution. Due to these regicide tracts, Milton lived under the constant threat of arrest and even execution after the monarchy was restored in 1660. Milton's poetic career is marked by his magnum opus, Paradise Lost, widely acclaimed as the greatest epic poem in the English language. Alongside Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes, it solidifies Milton's status as one of the most illustrious English poets. In his prose works, Milton fervently advocated for the abolition of the Church of England and the execution of Charles I. Throughout the English Civil Wars, continuing into the Interregnum and beyond the restoration of Charles II in 1660, he consistently espoused a political philosophy that opposed tyranny and state-sanctioned religion. His influence extended to the American and French revolutions. In his theological writings, Milton emphasized liberty of conscience, the supreme importance of scripture as a guide in matters of faith, and religious tolerance for dissenting voices. As a civil servant, he became the voice of the English Commonwealth after 1649, handling international correspondence and defending the government against polemical attacks from abroad. Milton's legacy has evolved over the centuries, with different readers interpreting him in diverse ways. Romantic poets celebrated him, particularly his portrayal of Satan as a symbol of revolutionary liberty. Victorian readers explored the intricacies of his theology. Some early 20th century modernist poets criticized Milton as a tyrannical poet who stifled the creativity of his literary successors. In the 21st century, he is often considered the closest rival to Shakespeare as the greatest author in English literary history. Upon the publication of Paradise Lost, Milton's status as an epic poet was promptly acknowledged. He cast an imposing influence over English poetry in the 18th and 19th centuries, often ranked as equal to or greater than all poets, including Shakespeare. However, Milton faced varying interpretations. He was celebrated by Whigs and criticized by Tories. He was associated with early Whiggism alongside figures like Edmund Ludlow, yet some high Tory Anglicans like Luke Milburn regarded him as an agent of darkness. Milton's political ideas, along with those of John Locke, Algernon Sidney, and James Harrington, significantly impacted the radical Whigs, whose ideology played a crucial role in the American Revolution. Modern scholars specializing in Milton's life, politics, and work are recognized as Miltonists, and his writings remain a prominent subject of extensive academic scholarship. LAllegro Il Penseroso. L'Allegro, meaning the happy man in Italian, is a pastoral poem published in John Milton's 1645 collection of poems. It is typically paired with the contrasting pastoral poem Il Penseroso, which explores a day spent in contemplation and thought. The exact composition date of L'Allegro and Il Penseroso is uncertain, as they do not appear in Milton's Trinity College poetry manuscript. They were likely written shortly after Milton left Cambridge and were first published in 1645 although they may have been issued early in 1646. In the collection, they provided a balance to each other and to his Latin poems. Barbara Liwalski suggests that LAllegro and Il Penseroso contrast and explore the ideal pleasures associated with different lifestyles, suggesting that a poet might choose one or the other, or both at different times or in sequence. LAllegro celebrates Grace Euphrosyne in a traditional Theocritan pastoral style. The poem is playful and set in a pastoral scene where the main character engages with folk stories, fairy tales, comedies, and performances. It progresses from the pleasures of LAllegro to those found in Il Penseroso. Il Penseroso, meaning the thinker, is a poem by John Milton found in the 1645 quarto of verses titled The Poems of Mr. John Milton, both English and Latin, published by Humphrey Moseley. It serves as a companion piece to LAllegro, which celebrates poetic mirth. The speaker in El Penseroso dispels fleeting joys from their mind before invoking divinest melancholy to inspire future verses. The melancholic mode is idealized as a means to attain a prophetic strain in poetry. The poem's central theme revolves around poetic inspiration and its connection to the imagined goddess of melancholy, invoked as the Muse. Milton's digressive style in both LAllegro and Il Penseroso makes them resistant to simple summary but allows for interpretive ambiguity. The speaker's vision of poetic inspiration in Il Penseroso allegorically explores a contemplative aspect of the poetic genre. Comus and Lycidas. Comus, also known as A Masque presented at Ludlow Castle 1634, is a masque written by John Milton to honor chastity. It was originally performed on Michaelmas 1634 before John Egerton, 1st Earl of Bridgewater, at Ludlow Castle, celebrating the Earl's appointment as Lord President of Wales. The full title of the masque's first publication is A Masque presented at Ludlow Castle 1634 on Michaelmas night before the Right Honourable John Earl of Bridgewater, Viscount Brackley, Lord President of Wales, and one of His Majesty's most honourable Privy Council. It premiered on September 29, 1634, featuring the Earl's two sons as the elder and second brother, and his daughter Alice as the lady. Comus was first anonymously published in 1637 by bookseller Humphrey Robinson. Milton later included it in his poems of 1645 and 1673. The text was also adapted into a successful masque by musician Thomas Arne in 1738, running for over 70 years in London. Comus is a masque that opposes masking, contrasting private heroism in chastity and virtue with the courtly revelry and pleasure. It marks Milton's first exploration of his recurring theme, the struggle between good and evil. The allegorical story revolves around a virtuous lady who becomes separated from her two brothers while traveling in the woods. She encounters the evil sorcerer Comus, son of Bacchus and Circe, who uses magic to imprison her in his palace. Despite Comus's hedonistic philosophy, the lady defends temperance and chastity in their debate. With the help of the attendant spirit and the river named Sabrina, she is eventually freed by her two brothers. Lycidas. Lycidas is a poem by John Milton written in 1637 as part of a volume of elegies published in 1638. It commemorates the untimely death of Edward King, a contemporary of Milton at the University of Cambridge, who drowned in a shipwreck in August 1637. The poem mourns the loss of a virtuous young man with a promising future in the clergy. Milton uses the conventions of classical pastoral elegy, with Lycidas being a shepherd to reflect on fame, life's meaning, and divine judgment. The poem begins with the speaker lamenting the challenging task of memorializing his friend Lycidas. He invokes the muses for inspiration and reflects on their shared past as shepherds. As the speaker contemplates Lycidas' death, he addresses various figures from the ancient world, questioning where they were when Lycidas drowned. He soon realizes the futility of such inquiries since Lycidas is gone and his earthly accomplishments are now meaningless. Apollo intervenes and advises the speaker to focus on the fame achieved in heaven rather than on earth. The speaker then shifts his attention to those responsible for Lycidas' fate. Saint Peter appears and chastises unworthy shepherds, allegorically criticizing corrupt clergy members in the Church of England who misled their congregations. Apologizing for the poem's digressions, the speaker returns to pastoral themes, urging the valleys to send flowers to adorn Lycidas's imaginary coffin beneath the ocean. The poem concludes by suggesting that Lycidas is not truly dead but has been reborn in heaven where the saints welcome him. This shift in perspective offers hope, symbolized by the line, "Tomorrow to fresh woods and pastures new." Epitaphium Damonis of Education and Milton's Divorce Tracts. Epitaphium Damonis. Epitaphium Damonis is John Milton's elegy dedicated to his friend Charles Diodati. While it draws inspiration from classical sources like Theocritus's Idyls, Virgil's Eclogues, and Ovid's Lament for Tibullus, a closer look reveals that Milton's debts extend to Neo-Latin poets such as Sannazaro, Buchanan, Castiglione, Mantuan, and Zanchi. The poem reflects not only its classical predecessors but also the Renaissance contemporaries of its time. What distinguishes Epitaphium Damonis is the intimate tone in which Milton addresses Damon Diodati. In a noteworthy digression, Milton confides his plans for a future epic with an Arthurian theme to his departed friend. This poem represents Milton's attempt to fuse a Christian sensibility with a classical pastoral form, a testament to his indebtedness to the Renaissance predecessors who used classical pastoral as a vehicle for expressing Christian consolation. Of Education. The Tractate of Education emerged in 1644, initially appearing anonymously as a single 8-page quarto sheet. It was written in response to a request from Samuel Hartlib, a Puritan educational reformer. This work stands as John Milton's comprehensive statement on educational reform and outlines his views on the best and noblest way of education. Milton's vision of education serves a dual purpose. Publicly, it aims to prepare individuals to perform justly, skillfully, and magnanimously in all aspects of both private and public life, including peace and war. Privately, it seeks to mend the fallen state of humanity, leading people to know God aright, and out of that knowledge to love Him, to be like Him as we may, the nearest by possessing our soul of true virtue. Milton's Divorce Tracts. Milton's Divorce Tracts consist of 4 interconnected polemical pamphlets written between 1643 and 1645. These pamphlets include The Doctrine and Discipline of Divorce, The Judgment of Martin Bucer, Tetrachordon, and Colasterion. They collectively argue for the legitimacy of divorce based on spousal incompatibility, a highly controversial stance at the time. These tracts stirred considerable controversy, facing opposition from religious figures who sought to ban them. While their publication in English brought Milton hostility, they hold significance in analyzing the relationship between Adam and Eve in his later epic, Paradise Lost. These tracts provide essential context for understanding the publishing landscape during a period marked by upheavals in the English printing business. Additionally, they shed light on the background for Milton's renowned work of prose, Areopagitica, which addressed issues of censorship and freedom of expression. Over time, the contentious nature of the issues surrounding divorce abated, with the Westminster Confession of Faith, penned between 1643 and 1652, permitting divorce in cases of infidelity and abandonment. Notably, Milton had addressed the Westminster Assembly of Divines, the authors of the Confession, in August 1643. Areopagitica. Areopagitica, a speech of Mr. John Milton for the liberty of unlicensed printing to the Parliament of England, is a seminal 1644 prose polemic authored by the English poet, scholar, and polemicist John Milton. It staunchly opposes licensing and censorship, making it one of history's most influential and impassioned philosophical defenses of freedom of speech and expression. Many of its principles have become foundational in modern justifications of these freedoms. The title of the work derives from Areopagus, or Hill of Ares, the site from which Athens' high court administered jurisdiction and imposed censorship. In a prose style inspired by Greek models, Milton argues that mandating licensing mirrors the despised papacy. He champions the free circulation of ideas as crucial for moral and intellectual development, and contends that attempting to suppress falsehood underestimates the power of truth. While the immediate goal of Areopagitica, repealing licensing, took another half century to achieve, the tract still holds a permanent place in the literature on human rights. Milton initiates his argument by defending the act of writing Areopagitica itself. He lauds England for overthrowing Charles I's tyranny and the prelates, but asserts his need to voice grievances. Milton justifies this purpose, arguing that presenting complaints before Parliament aligns with civil liberty and loyalty, as constructive criticism is superior to false flattery. He closes the introduction by urging Parliament to heed the voice of reason and willingly repeal any act for truth and righteous judgment. While recognizing individual rights, Milton's stance in Areopagitica does not entirely align with libertarianism, as he contends that the previous English law worked best. According to that law, all books required at least a printer's name, preferably an author's. Under this system, Milton argues if blasphemous or defamatory material was published, such books could still be destroyed afterward. Milton seeks a means to hold authors and publishers accountable for any mischievous or libellous work they produce. Nevertheless, he does not advocate unrestricted free speech and expresses remorse for libellous authors. He does have limits to his tolerance, notably stating that he does not tolerate popery and open superstition, provided that charitable and compassionate means are used to win back the misled. However, the second part of the statement, often omitted when quoting the first, is subject to debate regarding whether it mitigates bigotry.